The cemetery held its breath in the pre-dawn cold. Frost clung to the granite headstones like desperate prayers, each crystal catching the faint light bleeding through the eastern clouds. Garrett Thornfield stood before a grave he knew better than the lines on his own weathered hands, his breath forming ghosts in the October air. 10 years. A decade since Eleanor had taken her last breath in his arms, her blood warm and sticky against his chest, her eyes finding his one final time before the light left them. A decade since he had become both king and widower in the span of a single terrible night. The stone was simple, as she would have wanted. Eleanor Thornfield, Luna of the Northern Territory, beloved wife and mother. The dates carved beneath felt like an accusation. She had been 48, too young, too vital, too necessary. Garrett was 58 now, his dark hair threaded with silver that caught the morning light like frost. Scars mapped his body beneath the heavy coat, each one a story, a battle, a price paid for the crown he wore. His hands, still strong despite the years, trembled slightly as he placed the white roses on the frozen ground. Her favorites. "You would tell me I am being a fool," he thought, the words he could not speak aloud. "You would say 10 years is long enough to mourn, that the territory needs a king who looks forward, not back, that Owen needs a father who can forgive himself." But Eleanor was not there to tell him anything. She had not been there for 10 long, brutal years. The sound of footsteps behind him did not startle Garrett. He had heard Marcus approach 3 minutes ago, recognizing the slight drag of his old friend's left foot, a war wound from decades past, back when they were young wolves who thought themselves immortal. Marcus Stone stopped a respectful distance away, waiting. He was 56, built like a wall that had weathered countless storms but refused to fall. His face bore the kind of scars that came from putting yourself between danger and those you protected. He had been doing that for Garrett for 40 years, since they were teenagers in basic training together, two wolves with more rage than sense. The silence stretched between them, comfortable as an old coat. They had long since passed the need for meaningless words. Finally Garrett spoke, his voice rougher than intended. It always was on this day. "I am considering stepping down." The words hung in the cold air between them, crystallizing like the frost on the graves. Marcus did not react with shock or protest. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the weight of what had been said. Then he moved forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Garrett before Eleanor's grave. "She would haunt you for that," Marcus said quietly. Garrett felt the ghost of a smile touch his lips, bitter and brief. "She would haunt me for a lot of things. The council is getting restless. You know this." Marcus's voice held no judgment, only the flat statement of fact that came from decades of reading political currents. They want an heir, a clear line of succession. Without it, the territory becomes vulnerable. "I have an heir, Owen. Owen who has not spoken to you in 8 years. Owen who lives 200 miles away, working construction and pretending he was not born to be an alpha." Marcus turned his head slightly, meeting Garrett's eyes. "He blames you for her death. We both know that is not fair, but grief rarely is." The truth of it sat like stones in Garrett's chest. His son, his only child, the boy who had looked at him like he hung the moon, until the night that moon fell from the sky and took his mother with it. "I failed him," Garrett said. "The admission cost him. Failed her." "You survived," Marcus corrected. "There is a difference." Garrett wanted to believe that. Some days he almost could. Most days the weight of survival felt heavier than any crown. The sun was rising now, painting the cemetery in shades of amber and gold that seemed too beautiful for such a place. Garrett had stood in this spot every year on this date for 10 years, and every year the sunrise felt like mockery. The world kept turning, the seasons kept changing, life persisted in spite of grief. He should leave. The council meeting was in 2 hours, and they would expect him to be sharp, commanding, the alpha king who never wavered. Instead, he felt ancient, hollowed out, a man playing a role he no longer believed in. "There is something else," Marcus said, his tone shifting. "A report came in last night from the Border Patrol near the neutral zone. We have been tracking a Phantom Omega for 3 weeks now. No pack affiliation, no territory markers. Just appears and disappears like smoke." Garrett's attention sharpened despite himself. A lone Omega was unusual. A phantom one was dangerous. Vulnerability like that attracted predators. "What do we know?" "Nothing concrete. The scent is strange. Strong one moment, gone the next, like it is being masked." Marcus pulled a folded report from his coat pocket, offering it. Female, mid-40s, best guess. Works night shifts at that diner on Route 7, the one that sits right on the neutral line between our territory and the eastern lands. No records, no history. It is like she materialized 5 years ago and has been invisible ever since. Garrett took the report but did not open it. Something in Marcus's tone suggested there was more. There is something else, Marcus continued, and now there was an edge to his voice, a careful, controlled edge that Garrett recognized. Marcus only used that tone when something had shaken him. The scent. I only caught it once, 3 nights ago when I did the border sweep myself. It is fleeting, almost impossible to hold, but for just a moment, it reminded me of Eleanor. The world tilted. Garrett's hand clenched around the report, the paper crumpling. That is not possible. I know. Marcus met his eyes steadily. I know it is not. Eleanor is gone. But I thought you should know. Thought maybe you would want to investigate personally. The implication hung between them. Garrett rarely left the main compound anymore except for official business. He had turned the Northern Territory into a fortress of duty, never straying far from the responsibilities that defined him. Personal investigations were not part of his carefully controlled existence. But the idea of a scent like Eleanor's, impossible and wrong and somehow there anyway, pulled at something deep in his chest. I will go tonight, Garrett heard himself say, after the council meeting. Marcus nodded once, satisfied. I will arrange the escort. No escort, this one I do alone. If Marcus had an opinion about that, he kept it to himself. They stood together a moment longer, 2 aging warriors before a grave that marked the end of one life and the hollow continuation of another. Then Garrett turned away from Eleanor's stone, from the white roses already beginning to freeze, from the past that refused to release its grip. He walked through the cemetery gates with Marcus beside him, back toward the living world and the crown that waited, heavy and cold as always. Behind them, the sun rose higher, indifferent and eternal. The council chamber was exactly as oppressive as Garrett remembered, and he had been there 3 hours ago. Dark wood paneling absorbed the light from the iron chandeliers, and the massive oak table dominated the room like an altar to bureaucracy and endless debate. 12 high-backed chairs, 1 for each council member. 13, counting his own at the head. 23 faces, because several members had brought advisors who were not allowed to speak, but whose presence added weight to their arguments. Garrett could read the room in seconds. He had been doing this for 3 decades. 6 were solidly loyal. 4 were situationally loyal, depending on which way the political winds blew. 2 were actively looking for any excuse to undermine him. Thaddeus Moore, the eldest at 72, sat to Garrett's immediate right. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed, he had been on this council since before Garrett was born. He was also the only member Garrett trusted without reservation. The session had been going for 90 minutes, and they were only on the 3rd item of a 12-item agenda. Garrett's patience, already worn thin by the morning at the cemetery, was fraying. The matter of the heir, Councilor Patricia Vance said, not for the first time. Her tone was professionally neutral, but Garrett heard the edge beneath. She was 49, ambitious, and had made it clear she believed the Northern Territory needed younger leadership. We cannot continue to avoid this discussion, Alpha Thornfield. He let the use of his formal title slide, though it grated. In this room, surrounded by politics and posturing, no one called him simply Garrett. He was the title, the position, the symbol. The man underneath had been filed away years ago. We have an heir, Garrett said, his voice carrying the weight of command even when he kept it level. Owen Thornfield is my son and the designated successor. Who has not set foot in this territory in 8 years, Councilor Marcus Webb interjected. A man with no connection to the pack, no training in leadership, and by all accounts, no interest in the position. With all respect, Alpha, that is not a viable succession plan. Garrett's jaw tightened. Owen's estrangement was a wound that never healed, made worse by having it prodded in public forums. My son's current choices do not negate his birthright. Birthright without preparation is simply entitlement, Patricia Vance said. The territory needs assurance. We need to see the heir, speak with him, confirm he is willing and capable. Or, Councilor Raymond Foster added, his voice oily with false concern, we need to acknowledge reality and make alternative arrangements. You are 58, Alpha Thornfield, in excellent health, of course, but werewolf leaders rarely see 65. The stress of the position, the constant challenges, it takes a toll. We must plan for succession, whether through Owen or through other means. Other means. The euphemism for what they really wanted, which was for Garrett to name one of their sons or nephews as heir, bringing new power to their family lines. Enough! The single word cut through the rising debate like a blade. Garrett's alpha command bled into his voice, not a full dominance play, but enough to make every wolf in the room feel the weight of his authority. This discussion is tabled. We will revisit the issue of succession when there is actual cause for concern, not merely political anxiety. Alpha Thornfield, Patricia began, but Thaddeus Moore cleared his throat, a dry sound that somehow commanded attention despite its quietness. The Alpha has spoken, Thaddeus said mildly. We move to the next agenda item. The council shifted, some frustrated, some resigned. Garrett caught Marcus's eye where he stood against the wall with the other high-ranking pack members. His old friend's expression was carefully neutral, but Garrett could read the concern there. The rest of the meeting blurred together, reports on territory security, debates over trade agreements with the eastern lands, a petition from a pack family requesting permission to build on disputed land near the western border. All of it necessary, all of it exhausting. By the time the session ended, sunset was bleeding through the high windows, painting the council chamber in shades of rust and shadow. Garrett stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. The council members filed out, most avoiding his eyes, a few offering respectful nods. Only Thaddeus lingered, waiting until the room had emptied before approaching. You cannot avoid this forever, the old man said quietly. They are not wrong about the need for clarity. I know, Garrett felt the weight of every one of his 58 years. I am working on it. Are you? Thaddeus's shrewd eyes studied him. Or are you simply surviving day to day, hoping something will change? The accuracy of the observation stung. What would you have me do? Drag Owen back by force? Command him to forgive me? I would have you forgive yourself, Thaddeus said. Until you do that, the boy never will. He paused at the doorway. Eleanor's death was not your fault, Garrett. Nathaniel Crowe killed her. You ended Crowe. You avenged her. You did everything a mate and an alpha could do. Garrett said nothing. They had circled this conversation 100 times in 10 years. The logic was sound. The guilt remained. Thaddeus left, and Garrett stood alone in the darkening council chamber, watching the last light fade from the windows. It was time to go hunting for phantoms. The diner squatted on the edge of Route 7, like something that had given up trying and settled for survival. Faded yellow paint peeled from wooden siding. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, missing letters, so it read simply, D near. A handful of trucks and an ancient sedan occupied the gravel parking lot. Garrett sat in his truck across the road, watching, waiting. He had arrived an hour before her shift started, wanting to see who came and went, reading the patterns of this place. It was the kind of establishment that catered to those who existed in the margins. Night shift workers, travelers passing through who did not want questions, wolves who lived outside traditional pack structures, neither lone wolves by choice nor rogues by nature, just trying to exist in the spaces between. The neutral zone was 5 miles wide, running along the entire eastern border of the Northern Territory. By ancient agreement, it belonged to no pack, was governed by no alpha. It was a buffer, a no-man's land where the rules were simpler. Stay quiet, cause no trouble, and you could be left alone. Garrett had not been to this diner in 15 years. Eleanor had liked it, back in the early days of their mating. She had appreciated the anonymity, the way they could sit in a worn booth and drink terrible coffee and just be Garrett and Eleanor, not Alpha and Luna. The memory hurt. He pushed it down. A car pulled into the lot. Old model sedan, dented and rust-spotted. The driver's side door opened, and a woman emerged. Garrett's breath caught. She was not Eleanor. He knew that immediately, rationally. Eleanor had been gone 10 years. But something in the way she moved, in the set of her shoulders, in the exact shade of her auburn hair, sent a visceral shock through his system. The woman was dressed for work. Dark jeans, white button-down shirt, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Mid-40s, Marcus had estimated. Looking at her now, Garrett thought maybe 42 or 43. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of someone who had learned not to draw attention, who made herself small as a survival tactic. But underneath that carefully cultivated invisibility, Garrett sensed something else, a coiled readiness, The way she scanned the parking lot before heading inside was not the casual glance of someone arriving at work. It was tactical awareness, the kind that came from knowing danger could appear from any direction. She disappeared inside the diner. Garrett waited another 20 minutes, watching the dinner crowd thin, before crossing the road. The interior matched the exterior. Worn linoleum floors, booths with cracked vinyl seats, a counter with spinning stools that had seen better decades. The smell of fried food and burned coffee hung in the air, thick and oddly comforting in its familiarity. 4 customers, 2 truckers at the counter, an elderly couple in a corner booth, and a single man in his early 30s, sitting alone, watching the woman who worked behind the counter with an intensity that made Garrett's hackles rise. She felt Garrett enter. He saw it in the way her shoulders tensed microscopically, in the fractional turn of her head before she caught herself, and continued pouring coffee for one of the truckers. When she finally looked up, meeting his eyes, the impact of her gaze hit him like a physical force. Not Eleanor's eyes. Eleanor's had been warm brown, full of laughter and light. This woman's eyes were green, deep forest green, and they held shadows that spoke of pain survived, of losses carried, of a wariness that was justified by experience. She recovered quickly, her expression shifting to professional courtesy. "Take a seat anywhere. I will be with you in a moment." Her voice was lower than Eleanor's had been, rougher, the voice of someone who had screamed until it broke and never quite healed. Garrett chose a booth near the back, positioning himself so he could see the exits and the other customers. Old habits. The man who had been watching her was still watching her, his body language radiating a possessive interest that made Garrett's wolf stir, low and warning. The woman brought him a menu and a glass of water, her movements efficient. "What can I get you?" "Coffee, black." She nodded, started to turn away. "And answers if you are selling them." That stopped her. She looked at him again, really looked, and he saw recognition flicker in those green eyes. Not recognition of his face, though he thought perhaps she knew what he was. Alpha. The scent of authority and power was impossible to completely hide, even when he tried. "I serve coffee and mediocre food," she said evenly. "Answers cost extra, and I'm not sure you can afford them." There was steel in that quiet statement. Garrett found himself approving despite himself. "Try me." She hesitated, and in that hesitation he saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. Fight or flight, engage or disappear, stay or run. Then the door chimed and 2 men walked in. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. They were rogues. Garrett knew it instantly. Not just lone wolves, but rogues, the kind who had broken with pack law and basic decency. They moved wrong, held themselves wrong. Predators who had decided the rules no longer applied. The woman behind the counter went very still. It was the stillness of prey that knows it has been spotted, that understands running will only trigger the chase. "Well now," one of the rogues said, his voice carrying across the diner. "Catherine. Working late again, I see." So she had a name, Catherine. Garrett filed that away. "We are closing soon," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her frame. "You will have to get your food elsewhere tonight." "Now that is not very hospitable," the second rogue said. "And here we drove all this way just to see you." The other customers were reading the room now. The truckers had gone quiet, heads down, uninvolved. The elderly couple were slowly gathering their things, preparing to slip out. The young man who had been watching Catherine stood, but he was moving toward the door, not toward her. Cowards, all of them. Garrett could not entirely blame them. Rogues were dangerous, unpredictable. Getting involved could get you killed. But the woman, Catherine, she stood her ground. "I said we are closing." The first rogue smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Maybe we want takeout then. Maybe we want to take you out of here." That is when Garrett stood. The movement drew every eye in the room. He was tall, and age had not bent him. Broad-shouldered from years of training and combat, he did not have to release his alpha presence. It leaked out anyway, subtle as smoke, impossible to ignore. "The lady said no," Garrett said quietly. "That seems clear enough." The rogues turned to face him, and he saw the moment they assessed him. Older, alone, possibly an easier target than a woman who had already demonstrated she was not easily intimidated. They were wrong. "Old man," the first rogue said, his voice hardening, "this is not your business." "Actually," Garrett replied, moving forward with the deceptive ease of someone who had been fighting his entire life, "I am making it my business." The second rogue's eyes widened fractionally. He had caught it. The scent underneath the carefully controlled exterior, the undeniable marker of what Garrett was. Alpha, the rogue breathed. His companion stiffened. Garrett saw the calculation happening. Pride warring with self-preservation. 2 rogues against 1 aging alpha in a public place. They might win, might. But it would cost them, and by the time it was over, they would have drawn attention they did not want. "We are just leaving," the first rogue said finally. "No trouble. We were just leaving." "Excellent decision," Garrett said mildly. They left, quickly. The door chimed again, and then they were gone, their beat-up truck peeling out of the parking lot with unnecessary speed. The diner exhaled. The truckers went back to their food. The elderly couple finished gathering their things. The young man who had abandoned Catherine to her fate slipped out without looking back. And Catherine stood behind the counter, staring at Garrett with an expression he could not quite read. "Thank you," she said finally. "You did not have to do that." "No," Garrett agreed, returning to his booth. "I did not, but I did anyway." She brought him his coffee, set it down carefully, her hands absolutely steady despite what had just happened. Then, to his surprise, she slid into the seat across from him. Up close, the resemblance to Eleanor was less pronounced. The bone structure was different, the set of her mouth. But something about her presence, the way she held herself with dignity despite obvious exhaustion, that reminded him achingly of his lost mate. "You are not from around here," Catherine said. It was not a question. Passing through, Garrett lied smoothly. The coffee was terrible, but he drank it anyway. "You handled those rogues like you have handled rogues before." She tilted her head slightly. "Like you have handled a lot of them. I have been around long enough to know trouble when I see it." "Is that what I am, trouble?" Garrett met her eyes. "I have not decided yet." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Surprising, given what had just happened. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a moment. The diner was emptying out now, the last customer leaving a tip and heading for the door. Soon it would just be the 2 of them, and whatever unspoken truths hung in the air between them. "Why did you help me?" Catherine asked quietly. "Because you were alone and they were not," Garrett said simply. "Because I have a daughter who would be about your age if she had lived. Because sometimes we do the right thing not because we expect reward, but because the alternative is unacceptable." He did not have a daughter. That was a lie. But the sentiment was true enough. Catherine studied him with those shadowed green eyes. "I am not looking for a protector. I have survived this long on my own." "I am not offering protection," Garrett said. Though the lie tasted bitter, he was always offering protection. It was what alphas did, whether the Omega in question wanted it or not. "I am simply a man who saw an unfair fight and evened the odds. And now? Now I drink my terrible coffee, and you finish your shift, and we both go our separate ways. Unless you want to tell me why 2 rogues drove out here specifically to threaten you." Her expression shuddered. "That is my business." "Fair enough," Garrett said again. He pulled out his wallet, left a 20 on the table for a $3 cup of coffee. "But if you find yourself in trouble again, real trouble, the kind that 2 rogues are just the beginning of, there are resources, places you can go, people who can help." He pulled a card from his wallet. Plain white stock, no name or title, just a phone number. His personal line, the one only a handful of people had. "If you need help, call that number. No questions, no obligations." Catherine stared at the card like it might bite her. Why would you do that? Because 10 years ago, someone I loved died alone because I was not there in time, and I live with that every single day. He stood, leaving the card on the table beside the 20. I would rather not add another regret to the collection. He was almost to the door when her voice stopped him. "My name is not Catherine." He turned. She had picked up the card, holding it between 2 fingers like something precious and dangerous. "It is Kate," she said quietly. "Just Kate." "Garrett," he offered in return. "Just Garrett." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition or realization, he could not tell which. "You are lying about passing through." He smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "So are you lying about your name?" They stared at each other across the empty diner, 2 liars recognizing each other, 2 people carrying secrets that weighed more than words could express. Then Garrett pushed through the door and out into the night, and Kate watched him go, still holding his card. He did not look back. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Garrett was in his office when Marcus burst in without knocking, his face grim. "We have a situation." The kind of situation that had Marcus abandoning protocol was never good. Garrett was on his feet immediately. "Report." "She is here, at the front gate." Marcus's expression was hard to read. "The woman from the diner. Kate. She is asking for you. She is injured. And Garrett, she is pregnant." The world narrowed to a single point of focus. "Bring her in," Garrett commanded. "Medical wing, now." He was moving before Marcus finished nodding, down the hallway, through the compound, toward the front entrance where guards were already helping a woman out of a car, her car, the same beat-up sedan from the diner. Kate was barely standing. Blood streaked her face from a cut above her eyebrow. Her shirt was torn, and her hands, she had them pressed to her stomach, protective and desperate. When she saw Garrett, something in her expression cracked. "Help me," she whispered. "Please, he is coming for the baby." Garrett caught her as she collapsed, lifting her weight like she was made of air and glass. "Get the doctor," he snapped at the nearest guard. "Tell them we have an Omega in crisis. Move." As he carried her inside, past guards who stared, past pack members who whispered, Kate's hand found his shirt and clenched tight. "Nathaniel Crowe," she breathed, and the name was like a knife between his ribs. "He is alive. He is coming. He wants the baby." And Garrett's world, carefully constructed over 10 years of grief and duty and rigid control, shattered like ice beneath a wolf's howl. Because Nathaniel Crowe had been dead for 10 years. Garrett had killed him, had watched him burn, had been wrong about everything. The medical wing smelled of antiseptic and clean linens, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had erupted across the compound in the 3 hours since Kate's arrival. Garrett stood outside the examination room, his hands clenched at his sides, listening to the muffled voices of the doctor and nurses working inside. Marcus appeared beside him, silent as always, carrying 2 cups of coffee neither of them would drink. He offered one anyway. Garrett took it, the heat burning through the cardboard cup into his palms, physical sensation to anchor him when his mind wanted to spiral. "Crowe," Garrett said flatly. "Nathaniel Crowe." Marcus's jaw was granite. "I have already sent runners to confirm. If he is alive, if he is out there, we will know within 48 hours. If. Such a small word to carry such massive weight. The door opened. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged, stripping off latex gloves. She was 50, had been the pack physician for 2 decades, and had seen Garrett through more injuries than he could count. Her expression gave nothing away, which was somehow worse than bad news delivered plainly. "She is stable," Sarah said without preamble. 4 months pregnant, as she reported. The baby appears healthy despite the stress. She has extensive bruising consistent with a physical altercation, defensive wounds on her arms, and signs of long-term malnutrition. This woman has been running and hiding for some time. "Can she talk?" Garrett kept his voice level through sheer force of will. "She is sedated currently. I gave her something to help her rest. The panic attack she was experiencing was dangerous for both her and the fetus." Sarah's dark eyes studied Garrett with professional assessment. She kept saying someone named Crowe was hunting her, that he wanted the baby. "She said you would understand." "I understand," Garrett confirmed, though understanding and believing were 2 different animals. "When can I speak with her?" "Tomorrow morning at the earliest. Right now she needs rest and safety." Sarah paused. "Garrett, what is this? Who is this woman?" A question he did not have a full answer to. "Someone in trouble. Someone under my protection now." Sarah knew better than to push. She nodded once, accepting what he would tell her, and nothing more. "I will monitor her through the night. If anything changes, you will be the first to know." She left. Garrett and Marcus stood in the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the coffee growing cold in their hands. "You think Crowe is really alive?" Marcus said. "Not a question." "I watched him burn," Garrett replied. "Saw the building collapse. There was no body, but there was no way anyone walked out of that inferno." He paused. "I was certain. And now? Now I am certain of nothing." Garrett set the coffee down on a nearby table with more force than necessary. "If Crowe is alive, if he has been alive all this time, then everything we believed about Eleanor's death is wrong. Everything we built our peace on is built on lies." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "His son is alive." "What?" "My son, David." Marcus's voice was carefully controlled. "He was in that building too. We found his tags in the rubble, but no body. We assumed it burned completely. What if we were wrong about that too?" The implications cascaded. If Crowe survived, if David survived, if the enemy Garrett thought he had destroyed had actually just gone underground, biding time, planning. "I need to see Owen," Garrett said abruptly. If Crowe is moving, if he is targeting people connected to this pack, my son is exposed out there alone. Owen has made it clear he wants nothing to do with you or this pack. That does not mean I leave him defenseless." Garrett met Marcus's eyes. "Make the calls. Find out where Owen is currently living. Discreet surveillance only. Do not approach him. Not yet." Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone. Garrett turned back to the closed door of Kate's room. Through the narrow window, he could see her lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped softly. Even in sleep, her face was drawn with exhaustion and fear. She had come to him. In her moment of greatest need, she had remembered the card, the offer, the promise of help. Something about that trust settled into Garrett's chest like a stone. He had failed Eleanor, had failed Owen, had failed Marcus in ways that were still unfolding. He would not fail this woman. This Kate, who was not Catherine, who carried a child in danger, who had looked at him in that diner and seen something worth trusting, even if it cost him everything else he had left. Dawn was breaking when Garrett finally returned to his private quarters. He had spent the night in the medical wing, pacing the hallways, checking in with Sarah every hour, reviewing security protocols with the head of compound defense. No sleep. The adrenaline and purpose keeping him sharp despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. His quarters were too large for one person. They had been designed for an Alpha and Luna, and Eleanor's absence still haunted every room. Her books still lined the shelves in the study. Her favorite chair sat by the window where she used to read. Garrett had changed nothing in 10 years. Some part of him, unable to erase the evidence that she had existed here, had been loved here. He poured himself a whiskey despite the early hour. Stood at the window overlooking the compound below, watching his territory wake up to a new day that felt different than the one before. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Found Owen. Colorado. Working construction in Denver. Solo apartment. No pack affiliation. Surveillance in place. At least his son was alive and apparently stable. It was more than Garrett had known yesterday. Another text arrived seconds later. Eastern border reports confirmed. Wolf matching Crowe's description spotted 3 separate times in past 2 months, always gone before confirmation possible. But witnesses consistent, scar pattern matches. So it was true. Nathaniel Crowe had survived, had spent 10 years doing what exactly? Planning, recovering, building an army? And what did any of it have to do with a pregnant woman named Kate, who appeared out of nowhere 5 years ago and had been invisible ever since? Garrett's phone rang, Marcus not bothering with texts anymore. "We have another problem," Marcus said without preamble. "Council members are asking questions. Patricia Vance specifically wants to know why we brought an unknown pregnant Omega into the compound without vetting. She is calling an emergency session for noon today." "Of course she is," Garrett muttered. He could already imagine the political maneuvering, the accusations that he was acting rashly, putting the pack at risk for a stranger. "Tell them noon is fine, I will be there." "And the woman? What are you going to tell them about her?" "The truth, that she is under my protection, that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Marcus was quiet for a beat. "Garrett, you know they will use this. They will say you are compromised, that you are making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones." "Then let them say it," Garrett replied tiredly. "I have been making strategic decisions for 30 years, Marcus. It has cost me my wife, my son, every moment of peace I might have had. So yes, maybe I am making an emotional decision. Maybe I am choosing to protect someone because it is the right thing to do, not because it is the political thing to do." Another pause, then quietly, "Good, it is about damn time." Garrett ended the call and drank the rest of his whiskey in one burning swallow. Through the window, he could see the medical wing, could imagine Kate sleeping under guard, her hand unconsciously resting on the curve of her belly, protecting a child who was already in danger before it even drew breath. What had she said in the diner? "I am not looking for a protector. I have survived this long on my own." And he had said he was not offering protection. But they had both been lying then, and they both knew it. Garrett set down his glass and headed for the shower. He had 4 hours before facing the council. 4 hours to prepare for the fight he knew was coming. 4 hours to figure out how to explain why an aging, grieving Alpha King had decided that a stranger's life mattered more than political convenience. The answer, when it came to him under the hot spray of water, was simple. Because he was tired of choosing duty over decency, tired of letting fear of loss prevent him from trying to save what could be saved. Because 10 years ago, Eleanor had died and he had not been able to stop it. But maybe, just maybe, he could stop it from happening again, even if it meant burning down everything else in the process. The council chamber had never felt smaller. Garrett stood at the head of the table, 26 pairs of eyes fixed on him with varying degrees of hostility, concern, and calculation. Outside the tall windows, rain hammered against the glass, turning the world gray and indistinct. Patricia Vance sat forward in her chair, her posture aggressive despite the professional neutrality of her expression. She had come prepared, a folder of documents arranged precisely before her. She always did love her evidence, her carefully constructed arguments designed to back him into corners. "Let us be clear about the situation," Patricia began, her voice carrying that tone of reasonable concern that was more dangerous than open hostility. "You brought an unknown Omega into this compound. No background check, no verification of identity, no consultation with this council." She paused, letting the weight of those accusations settle. "And now we learn that this woman is being hunted by Nathaniel Crowe, a wolf we all believed dead for 10 years. Believed dead because Alpha Thornfield killed him," Counselor Raymond Foster added. "Or so we thought." Garrett let them talk. It was a tactic he had learned decades ago. Let them exhaust their initial outrage, let them feel heard, and then dismantle their arguments with facts they could not dispute. Thaddeus Moore cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the rising tension like a blade. "Perhaps we should hear what actually happened before we pass judgment." He looked at Garrett with those shrewd, ancient eyes. "Alpha Thornfield, would you care to explain the circumstances?" Garrett inclined his head in acknowledgement. "3 weeks ago, I encountered a woman at a diner in the neutral zone. She was being threatened by rogues. I intervened. That is all." "That is not all," Patricia interjected. "You gave her your personal contact information, your private number that only a handful of wolves possess." "I offered assistance to someone in danger," Garrett corrected, "as any alpha with a shred of honor would do. And when she showed up here, pregnant and claiming Nathaniel Crowe is alive and hunting her, you did not think that warranted an immediate council notification?" Garrett's jaw tightened. "She arrived injured and in medical crisis. My priority was her safety and the safety of her unborn child. Politics could wait." "Politics," Patricia said softly, dangerously, "are what keep this pack safe. Structure, protocol, the rules we follow so that we do not make rash decisions based on emotion rather than strategy." There it was, the real accusation, that he was acting emotionally, allowing personal feelings to override his judgment as Alpha King. "This woman," Counselor Marcus Webb said, consulting his own notes, "Catherine Winters, though she apparently goes by Kate, no records prior to 5 years ago, no pack affiliation, no family ties we can verify. She is a ghost, Alpha Thornfield, and you have brought this ghost into our territory based on nothing more than a feeling, based on the fact that she asked for help," Garrett said quietly, "and I am in a position to provide it." "Even if it puts the entire pack at risk?" Patricia pressed. "If Crowe is alive, if he is hunting her specifically, then you have just painted a target on this compound. Every wolf in this territory is now in potential danger because you decided to play hero for a stranger." The accusation hung in the air. Garrett could see heads nodding around the table, pack members who were perhaps loyal to him, but also concerned for their families, their children, their own safety. Marcus Stone spoke from his position against the wall, where the high-ranking pack members stood during council sessions. "With respect, Counselor Vance, we do not abandon those in need simply because it might be dangerous. That is not who we are." Patricia's eyes flicked to Marcus, assessing. "Commander Stone, your loyalty to Alpha Thornfield is admirable, but loyalty should not blind us to risk. This woman could be bait, a trap. Crowe could be using her to draw us out, to weaken our defenses. Then we proceed with caution," Thaddeus Moore interjected. "But we do not throw a pregnant woman to the wolves, literal or metaphorical, because we are afraid." "I am not suggesting we throw her out," Patricia said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I am suggesting we think very carefully about what we are committing to, about what this protection might cost us." Garrett had heard enough. He let his alpha presence bleed into the room, not a full dominance play, but enough to remind every wolf present exactly who held the power here. "This discussion is noted," he said, his voice carrying command that made several council members straighten unconsciously. "Your concerns are acknowledged, but my decision stands. Kate Winters is under my personal protection. She will remain in this compound until the threat against her is neutralized. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to challenge me directly. Silence, heavy and uncomfortable. Patricia Vance was the first to break it. I am not challenging your authority, Alpha. I am questioning your judgment. Noted, Garrett said flatly. This session is adjourned. He walked out before anyone could object, Marcus falling into step beside him. They made it halfway down the corridor before Marcus spoke. That went about as well as expected. Patricia is positioning herself, Garrett said. She sees weakness, and she is probing to see how deep it goes. Is she wrong? Garrett stopped walking, turned to face his oldest friend. About me being compromised? Maybe. I do not have a rational explanation for why I am doing this, Marcus. I just know it is the right thing to do. Sometimes that is enough, Marcus replied, though he looked troubled. The runners came back an hour ago, confirmed sightings of Crowe in 3 locations over the past 8 weeks, always moving, never staying long. And Garrett, there is something else. Always something else. Speak plainly. David, my son. Marcus's voice was carefully controlled. 2 witnesses place him with Crowe's group. Alive, active, not a prisoner. The implications of that settled like lead in Garrett's stomach. Your son is working with the man who killed his mother. I do not know if working with is accurate, Marcus said, but he is with them. And if David is there, if he has been alive all this time and never tried to contact me, then either he is a prisoner in all but chains, or he chose to stay. We will find out which, Garrett promised, and when we do, we will deal with it. But Marcus, you need to be prepared for the possibility that your son made a choice you will not be able to forgive. Marcus nodded once, his face carved from stone. I have been preparing for that for 10 years. They continued down the hallway in silence. Garrett's mind was already moving ahead, cataloging threats, planning responses. If Crowe was alive and mobile, he would need more than just compound security. He would need intelligence, eyes on potential approach routes, alliances with neighboring territories who could serve as early warning systems. He was so deep in tactical planning that he almost walked past the medical wing without stopping. Marcus's hand on his arm halted him. You should check on her, Marcus said. Let her know what she is walking into. Garrett hesitated. The truth was, he had been avoiding this conversation. Kate had arrived desperate and afraid, seeking sanctuary. But sanctuary came with costs, and she needed to understand that her presence had just made her the center of a political firestorm. Go, Marcus urged. I will coordinate with border patrols and arrange the surveillance protocols. Garrett pushed through the doors into the medical wing. The antiseptic smell had become familiar over the past 12 hours. Sarah Chen sat at the nurse's station, reviewing charts on a computer screen. She looked up when he entered. She is awake, Sarah said without preamble. Calmer than last night, but she has been asking for you. How is she, physically? Stable. The baby is fine. I want to keep her here another 24 hours for observation, but barring complications, she should be able to move to guest quarters tomorrow. Sarah paused. Garrett, she has scars. Old ones. This woman has been hurt before, badly. Whatever she is running from, it has been hunting her for a long time. Noted. Can I see her? Room 3. And Garrett, be gentle. She is holding on by a thread. He found Kate sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the rain. She had been cleaned up, her injuries tended, dressed in hospital scrubs that were too large for her frame. The late afternoon light painted her in shades of gray and shadow, and for a moment Garrett just stood in the doorway, observing. She was more fragile than he had realized. The defensive competence she had shown at the diner had been a mask, he understood now. Underneath was someone who had been running and hiding for so long that she had forgotten what safety felt like. You came, she said without turning. Her voice was hoarse, probably from the screaming Sarah had mentioned in her initial report. Garrett stepped into the room, closing the door behind him for privacy. I said I would help. I keep my promises. Kate finally looked at him, and the exhaustion in her green eyes was profound. Even after 8 hours of sedated sleep, she looked like someone who had not rested properly in years. I brought trouble to your door, she said flatly. You should have turned me away. I do not turn away people in need, even when that need comes with monsters attached. She shifted slightly, her hand moving unconsciously to rest on the curve of her belly. Nathaniel Crowe is not just dangerous, he is obsessed, and he will burn down everything between him and what he wants. Which is your child? Kate's expression flickered. Not just my child. The bloodline. She laughed, bitter and broken. I did not even know what I was until Crowe told me. Did not know my family name meant anything beyond dead parents and a history I never learned. Garrett pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, giving her space but showing he was not leaving. Tell me. From the beginning. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. I grew up in foster care. Orphaned at 6, no living relatives anyone could find. Bounced between homes until I aged out at 18. I was nobody, just another lost kid in an overwhelmed system. But you are not nobody, no. Kate's smile was sharp with old pain. I am Catherine Eloise Silvermane, last living descendant of the Keeper bloodline. The family that was supposed to guard the old laws, maintain the sacred balance between packs. We were scholars, mediators, record keepers, not powerful in the way alphas are powerful, but important. Silvermane. Garrett knew that name, or rather, knew the legends. The Silvermane Lunas had been mythical figures, able to see the truth beneath lies, to sense corruption before it took root. They had been the conscience of the werewolf world, and they had been systematically hunted to extinction 50 years ago by wolves who saw them as threats to their power. I thought the Silvermanes were gone, Garrett said carefully. So did everyone else. Kate pulled her knees up slightly, making herself smaller. My mother survived by hiding who she was. She met my father, a human who did not know what she was, and they tried to build a normal life. It did not work. She died when I was 6. Cancer, they said. But I think now it was something else. I think someone found her. And you inherited the bloodline. I inherited a legacy I did not even know existed until 5 years ago. Kate's voice hardened. I was married, had a daughter, Lily. She was 7 years old and she was everything, my whole world. The past tense landed like a blow. Garrett stayed silent, letting her find the words in her own time. Crowe found us. Kate's eyes were dry, but her hands shook. I do not know how. I had been so careful, lived so quietly. But he knew what I was. He came to our house one night with his wolves, and he told my husband that I was too valuable to waste on a human, that the Silvermane bloodline needed to continue, and he would be the one to ensure it did. Garrett felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled. My husband tried to fight. Kate's voice was hollow. They killed him in front of me. And Lily, my baby, she ran. They caught her in the backyard. I heard her screaming for me, and I could not get to her. Crowe held me down and made me watch while they made it look like an accident. House fire, the report said. Faulty wiring. 2 victims. My husband and my daughter burned beyond recognition. Christ, Garrett breathed. Except I did not die. Kate looked at him then, and her eyes were empty. Crowe kept me. 4 months. I do not want to talk about those months. But he wanted an heir carrying Silvermane blood. He wanted to bind me to him so completely that I could never escape. She touched her stomach again. This baby is not from love. It is from rape and ritual and a monster's ambition. The silence that followed was profound. Outside, the rain continued its assault on the windows, nature indifferent to human suffering. 2 months ago, I escaped, Kate continued. There was a fire, real one this time. His compound burned. I thought he died in it. I ran, kept running, found my way to that diner, took the name Winters, tried to disappear again. She met Garrett's eyes. And then you walked in, and you looked at me like I was worth saving, and I did not know what to do with that. You are worth saving, Garrett said quietly. You and your child both. Even though this baby is his? Even though every time I feel it move, I remember what he did? Especially then. Garrett leaned forward, his voice firm. That child is innocent. It did not choose how it was conceived. And you survived something that would have broken most people. You are still fighting. That is worth everything. Kate's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and painful. I do not know how to be a mother to this baby. I do not know how to love something that came from so much horror. Then you learn, Garrett said, one day at a time. And you are not alone in this. Not anymore. She cried then, truly cried, and Garrett did something he had not done in 10 years. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed and pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries and the life she carried. He held her while she shook, while years of terror and grief poured out, while she finally let herself break in a place where breaking was safe. When the storm passed, she pulled back, wiping at her face with shaking hands. I am sorry. You do not need this. You have your own burdens. Everyone has burdens, Garrett said. The question is whether we carry them alone or let others help shoulder the weight. Why are you doing this? Kate asked. You do not know me. You owe me nothing. Garrett was quiet for a moment, considering how much truth to share. Because 10 years ago, I lost my wife to violence I could not prevent. Because I have a son who will not speak to me because I failed to protect the person he loved most. Because I have spent a decade choosing duty over everything else, and it has left me empty. He met her eyes. Maybe I am doing this because you need help. Or maybe I am doing it because I need to prove to myself that I can still save someone. That is a heavy burden to put on a stranger. You are not a stranger anymore. You are under my protection. That makes you pack, whether the council likes it or not. They do not like it, do they? Kate had stopped crying, her composure returning. I heard raised voices before you came in. The council is concerned about the risk your presence brings. They are not wrong to be concerned. Garrett was nothing if not honest. But their concerns do not override what is right. You stay. You heal. You prepare to bring that child into the world safely. And if Crowe comes, we will be ready. You cannot fight him, Kate said urgently. You do not understand what he is. He is not just an alpha. He has done things, learned things, dark rituals that make him stronger than he should be. He has been alive for over a century, Garrett. He should be dead from age alone, but he found ways to extend his life, to steal power from others. The pieces were clicking together. Eleanor. She was investigating something before she died. Something about illegal rituals and forbidden practices. Kate nodded. The Silvermane archives. My family kept records of every pack, every alpha, every major event in werewolf history. Crowe wanted those archives. He thought my mother had them. She did not. But Eleanor, your wife, she knew about them. She came to see my mother years before I was born, trying to learn about Crowe's past, trying to find evidence of his crimes. My wife knew your mother? The world was getting smaller and more tangled. They were friends, Kate said softly. Distant friends, but friends. Eleanor was one of the few wolves who believed the Silvermanes should not have been hunted to extinction. She was trying to prove that Crowe was behind the purges, that he engineered the extinction so no one could expose what he had done. And he killed her for it. I think so. I was 14 when my mother died, but I remember her crying the day she heard about Eleanor's death. Remember her saying that the last good Luna was gone, and now there was no one to stop him. Garrett stood, moving to the window. The rain was letting up, the clouds breaking apart to reveal patches of evening sky. His reflection in the glass looked older than he felt, worn down by revelations that kept twisting the knife. He has been planning this for a long time, Garrett said. Decades. Killing the Silvermanes, killing Eleanor, keeping you prisoner. All of it building towards something. A bloodline that cannot die, Kate said. A child with both Silvermane abilities and his stolen power. He wants to create a new kind of werewolf, one that can rule forever, unchallenged. Then we make sure that never happens. Garrett turned back to face her. You are safe here. Your child will be safe here. And when Crowe comes, and he will come, we will end this. Properly. Finally. Kate looked at him with something that might have been hope or might have been despair. She had been running too long to trust promises easily. I want to believe you, she said quietly. Then believe me. Garrett moved back to the chair, sitting so they were at eye level. I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, Kate. Failed people I should have protected. But I am still here, still fighting, still trying to do better. Let me do better for you. She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching for lies and finding only truth. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I will trust you. God help us both, but I will trust you. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the room in amber light. It felt like a sign, though Garrett had long since stopped believing in signs. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to start believing again. The war room was not a room designed for comfort. Maps covered every wall, marked with territory boundaries, pack holdings, strategic choke points. The table in the center could seat 20 and currently held 12. Garrett stood at the head, Marcus to his right, their most trusted commanders arranged around them. It had been 3 days since Kate's arrival. 3 days of intelligence gathering, of reaching out to contacts across multiple territories, of preparing for a war that might already be at their doorstep. Marcus laid out a series of photographs on the table. Surveillance images, grainy but clear enough. Nathaniel Crowe at a gas station 200 miles south. Crowe speaking with known rogues at a highway rest stop. Crowe entering a warehouse that had burned to the ground 6 hours after the photo was taken. "He is circling," Marcus said, moving closer but never committing to a direct approach. "Testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses." "How many wolves is he traveling with?" Commander Sarah Winters, head of tactical operations, leaned forward to study the images. She was 45, battle-scarred, and one of the few wolves Garrett trusted completely in combat situations. "Minimum of 20, Marcus replied. "Could be as many as 40 if he is keeping reserves hidden. Mix of rogues and wolves who still hold grudges against the Northern Territory." "From the attack 10 years ago," Garrett surmised. Marcus nodded. "We killed a lot of Crowe's wolves that night. The survivors would have scattered, but if he is rebuilding, offering them revenge as payment, they would come back." Commander James Hendricks, in charge of compound security, cleared his throat. "We have reinforced all entry points, doubled patrols on the perimeter, installed new surveillance equipment at key positions. If Crowe tries a direct assault, we will have advance warning." "He will not try a direct assault," Garrett said. "He is too smart for that. He will wait until we are distracted, divided. He will look for the moment when our attention is elsewhere." "Then we make sure our attention is never elsewhere," Sarah said firmly. "We also need to consider the political dimension." Thaddeus Moore spoke from his seat near the back. The elder counselor had requested to sit in on the war planning, and Garrett had agreed. "Neighboring territories are watching how we handle this. If we appear weak or divided, it invites challenges we cannot afford." "What are you suggesting?" Garrett asked. "An alliance. Reach out to Alpha Victor Steele in the Eastern Territory. You two served together years ago. He owes you favors." Sarah was already nodding, seeing the tactical value. "If Crowe moves against us and Victor's forces are positioned as backup, we increase our defensive capability significantly." "And Victor gets what in return?" Marcus asked. The question was valid. Alphas did not offer military support without expecting something back. "Information," Thaddeus suggested. "Victor has been trying to root out a corruption problem in his own pack. Silvermane knowledge might help him identify the wolves working against him." Garrett considered. Victor Steele was 62, a grizzled veteran who had fought in the same territory's wars that had forged Garrett's early leadership. They had saved each other's lives more than once. The bond between them was real. "I will reach out to Victor personally," Garrett decided. "Tonight. If he agrees to the alliance, we coordinate our intelligence networks and defensive positions." "And Kate?" Sarah asked. "She is the target here. Have we considered using her as bait?" "No," Garrett said flatly. "We do not use pregnant women as bait." "With respect, Alpha," Sarah pressed, "if we could draw Crowe into a trap using her as the lure, controlled circumstances, overwhelming force, we could end this quickly." "At what cost?" Garrett's voice hardened. "We become the monsters we are fighting. The answer is no." Sarah backed down, but not everyone looked satisfied. Garrett could see the calculations happening in some minds. The tactical value of sacrificing one for the safety of many. It was the kind of cold math that leadership sometimes required. "But not this time. Not for this. There is another consideration," Marcus said carefully. "My son, David. If he is with Crowe's forces, if he is participating in whatever Crowe is planning, we need to decide how we handle that." The room went quiet. Everyone knew about Marcus's son, about the tragedy of losing him in the same attack that killed Eleanor. Finding out he was alive complicated everything. "Rules of engagement," Commander Hendricks said. "Do we treat him as hostile?" Marcus's expression was carved from stone. "You treat him as any other enemy combatant. If he attacks, you defend yourselves. I will not ask you to show mercy to my son if it puts your lives at risk." "And if there is an opportunity to capture rather than kill?" Garrett asked gently. "Then we take it." Marcus met his eyes. "But I am not naive enough to think David is an innocent victim in this. If he has been with Crowe for 10 years, he has made choices. I need to know what those choices were and why he made them." "Fair enough," Garrett agreed. He looked around the table at the assembled commanders. "We have 3 priorities. 1. Maintain defensive readiness. 2. Gather intelligence on Crowe's movements and intentions. 3. Protect Kate and prepare for the possibility that her child might be born before this conflict resolves." "And if Crowe demands an exchange?" Sarah asked. "Him backing off in return for the woman?" "Then we tell him to go to hell," Garrett said. "This pact does not negotiate with terrorists. We do not trade lives. We stand and we fight and we win or we die trying. That is who we are. Heads nodded around the table. Agreement or acknowledgement, Garrett was not entirely sure which, but it would have to be enough. The meeting continued for another hour, going over contingency plans, supply lines, medical preparedness for potential casualties. By the time they adjourned, night had fallen completely, and Garrett's head ached from too much strategic thinking and too little sleep. He found Kate in the compound library. Sarah Chen had cleared her for movement within the main building, and Kate had gravitated immediately toward the books. She stood before a shelf of histories, one hand absently rubbing her belly, her head tilted to read the spines. Garrett waited in the doorway, watching. There was something peaceful about her in this moment, the constant fear temporarily set aside in favor of intellectual curiosity. "You have a good collection," Kate said without turning. She had sensed him there. The Silvermane bloodline apparently included heightened awareness. Most packs do not keep the old texts anymore. They think history is just stories. "History is usually warning," Garrett said, stepping into the library. "We just do not always recognize the warnings until it is too late." Kate pulled a book from the shelf, examining the cover. "Chronicles of the Northern Wars," she read. "You were in these wars." "I was. 20 years old and convinced I was invincible. The truth was, I was terrified every single day." "But you fought anyway." "Because there was no choice." Garrett moved to stand beside her. "My father was Alpha King then. He needed his son to be strong, to lead, to not show weakness. So I learned to bury the fear and do what had to be done." Kate replaced the book and pulled down another. "That is a heavy burden for a 20-year-old. It made me who I am, for better or worse." Garrett hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him. "You said Eleanor knew your mother. Did she ever mention me?" Kate was quiet for a moment, considering. "She said your father was the kind of alpha who ruled through fear, and that you would either break under that legacy or become something better. She was hoping you would become something better." "And did I?" "You are asking me? I have known you less than a week. Sometimes strangers see us more clearly than the people we have known for years." Kate turned to face him, the book forgotten in her hands. "I think you are a man who carries too much guilt for things that were not your fault. I think you have confused duty with penance. And I think," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I think you are trying very hard to save me because you could not save her." The observation was too accurate, too sharp. Garrett should have deflected, changed the subject. Instead, he found himself answering honestly. "Eleanor died in my arms. I felt her last heartbeat against my chest, felt her go cold while I was still covered in her blood. And the worst part, the part I can never forgive myself for, is that my last words to her that morning were about politics, about a council dispute. I was annoyed with her for taking a side I disagreed with, and I let her know it." "We always think we have more time," Kate said softly. "We never do. That is the lesson. We never have as much time as we think." Garrett met her eyes. "So yes, you are right. I am trying to save you because I could not save Eleanor, but that does not make your life less valuable or this choice less right. Even if it cost you everything else?" Even then, they stood in the library, surrounded by the weight of histories and the ghosts of choices made and prices paid, two damaged people trying to figure out if redemption was possible. Then Garrett's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, short and urgent. "Perimeter breach, east side, multiple contacts." Garrett was moving before he finished reading. "Stay here," he commanded Kate. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me or Marcus." "What is happening?" "They are here. Get to safety now." He ran. The compound erupted into controlled chaos. Alarms blared. Lights blazed to life across the grounds. Garrett reached the security center in 90 seconds, Marcus already there coordinating the response. "Report," Garrett snapped. 8 contacts breached the east perimeter at 3 separate points. Marcus pointed to the display screens showing thermal imaging. "They are moving fast, organized. Military tactics. They are not coming for a fight. This is a probe, or a distraction." Garrett's mind raced. "Where is Kate?" "Still in the main building. I have 2 guards en route to the library." "Not enough. Send 4. And get Sarah to coordinate defensive positions. If this is a distraction, the real attack is coming from another direction." "Already on it." Marcus was speaking rapidly into a headset, commands flowing. The screens showed their forces deploying, covering vulnerabilities, preparing for multiple scenarios. Then one of the screens went dark. "What just happened?" Garrett demanded. "East Camera 3 just died. Not damaged. Shut down remotely." Marcus's face went grim. "They have someone who knows our systems. An inside job or good intelligence?" But Garrett already knew the answer. David. Marcus's son would know the compound layout, would know their protocols. Marcus was thinking the same thing. His expression was carved from grief and fury. The radio crackled. "Security Team 2 reporting. We have visual on one of the intruders. It is David Stone. Repeat, David Stone is among the breach team." "Stand by for orders," Marcus said into the radio. Then to Garrett, quietly, "I will handle this." "No." Garrett put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We handle this together, like we have always handled everything, together." Before Marcus could respond, every light in the compound went out. Complete darkness for 3 seconds. Then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And in that crimson illumination, Garrett heard something that made his blood freeze. Kate screaming. He ran. Garrett moved through the crimson emergency lighting like a force of nature, his wolf rising so close to the surface that his eyes blazed gold. Behind him, Marcus shouted commands into the radio, coordinating defensive positions, but Garrett was focused on only one thing. Kate's scream had cut off too abruptly. He hit the library at a full sprint, slamming through the door hard enough to crack the frame. The room was in chaos. 2 of his guards were down, unconscious but breathing. Books had been scattered across the floor. And the window, the tall window that overlooked the eastern gardens, stood open to the night. Kate was gone. Garrett forced himself to breathe, to think through the rage and fear. He moved to the window, examining the ground below. Fresh tracks in the mud. 4 sets, 3 wolves carrying a 4th person between them. "They took her," Marcus said from the doorway. His voice was flat, controlled, professional. But Garrett heard the fury underneath. "They breached, created a distraction, and extracted her while we were responding to the perimeter alerts." "It was David," Garrett said, "not a question." Marcus nodded once, his jaw tight. He knows this compound, knows our protocols. He would have known exactly where to hit and when. "How long ago?" 3 minutes, maybe 4. They are heading east, toward the neutral zone. If they reach Crowe's vehicles, we lose them. Then, we do not let them reach the vehicles. Garrett was already moving, his mind shifting into combat mode. Every decision crystallized with tactical clarity. "Alert Victor Steele. Tell him we are pursuing hostile forces into the neutral zone, and we need his support. Get our fastest trackers and our best fighters. We leave in 2 minutes. Alpha, this could be a trap." Marcus was following, matching his pace. "Crowe could be using her to draw you out, away from compound defenses." "I know." Garrett hit the armory, pulling weapons from racks with practiced efficiency. A blade, a sidearm loaded with silver rounds. And it does not matter. We do not abandon our people. We do not let them be taken. Marcus armed himself in silence, then keyed his radio. "All units, this is Commander Stone. We have a hostage extraction in progress. Alpha Thornfield is leading the pursuit team. Lieutenant Hendricks, you have command of compound defense. Lock it down. No one in or out without my authorization." The compound was organized chaos as Garrett assembled his team. Sarah Winters appeared with 6 of their best combat wolves. Thaddeus Moore, despite his age, came armed and ready. And a young wolf named Jackson Park, their finest tracker, who could follow a scent through hell itself if necessary. They shifted in the courtyard, 13 wolves under emergency lighting, their breath steaming in the cold night air. Garrett was the largest, his alpha form massive and scarred, silver threaded through black fur. Marcus beside him nearly as large, battle-tested and deadly. Garrett howled once, a sound that carried across the entire territory. A declaration of war, a promise of vengeance. Then they ran. Jackson took point, his nose to the ground, following Kate's scent through the darkness. The trail led east as Marcus had predicted, through the forest that bordered the compound, toward the neutral zone where pack law did not apply. Garrett pushed his aging body harder than he had in years. His muscles burned, his lungs ached, but he did not slow, could not slow. Every second that passed was another second Kate was in enemy hands, terrified, believing herself abandoned. The scent trail was strong, which meant they were gaining. Crowe's wolves were moving fast, but not fast enough. They were burdened with a prisoner, and pregnancy made Kate heavier than her frame suggested. Ahead, Jackson's ears went forward. "Contact," he signaled with a sharp bark. Garrett saw them through the trees. 4 wolves running in formation. The largest carried Kate across his back, her unconscious form secured with rope. David Stone, even in wolf form, was recognizable by the distinctive white patch on his left shoulder. The pursuit team poured on speed, closing the distance. 100 yards, 75, 50. One of Crowe's wolves glanced back, saw them coming, and sent up a howl of alarm. The formation broke. 3 wolves turned to engage while David continued forward with Kate. Marcus broke off without hesitation, going after his son. Garrett wanted to follow, wanted to ensure his brother had backup, but Kate was the priority. He angled toward David, leaving Sarah and her team to handle the 3 defenders. The forest erupted into violence behind him, snarls and screams and the wet sounds of fangs finding flesh. Garrett blocked it out, focused only on the wolf ahead carrying his target. David was fast, younger, and unburdened by years of leadership stress, but Garrett was motivated by something beyond speed. He was driven by the memory of Eleanor dying in his arms, by the knowledge that he had a chance, this one chance, to not fail someone who trusted him. He launched himself at David from an angle, hitting the younger wolf broadside. They went down in a tangle of fur and fury, rolling across the forest floor. Kate's unconscious body tumbled free, coming to rest against a tree. David recovered first, younger reflexes serving him well. He lunged for Kate, clearly intending to grab her and run. Garrett intercepted, his jaws closing on David's shoulder, not to kill, but to hold. They fought. David was skilled, trained by Marcus himself, but Garrett had 3 decades of combat experience. He used David's momentum against him, used the younger wolf's aggression to create openings. Within 30 seconds, he had David pinned, jaws at his throat. David went still. Submission or strategy, Garrett could not tell. "Shift!" Garrett commanded, releasing enough pressure for speech to be possible. David shifted beneath him, human once more. He was leaner than Garrett remembered, harder. His eyes held a coldness that had not been there 10 years ago. "You cannot win this," David said. His voice was steady despite the vulnerable position. "Crowe has already won. He just has not collected his prize yet." "Where is he?" Garrett demanded, shifting back to human himself but keeping David pinned. "Close, watching, waiting to see if you are fool enough to chase this far." Garrett heard movement behind him. Marcus, arriving in human form, breathing hard. He stopped when he saw his son pinned beneath Garrett, and something in his expression broke. "David," Marcus said, "just the name, nothing more." But it carried the weight of 10 years of grief and loss and shattered hope. "Father," David's voice was cold. "You look old. I am old." Marcus moved closer slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "I thought you were dead. We searched the rubble for weeks, found your tags. You found what Crowe wanted you to find." David's smile was bitter. "He pulled me out of that fire, saved my life when your precious Alpha King left me to burn." "That is not what happened," Garrett said quietly. "We searched for survivors. We found none. You found what you wanted to find." David's eyes blazed with old anger. "You were so focused on Eleanor, on the Alpha's dead mate, that you did not look hard enough for anyone else. My mother died that night too, but no one mourned her like they mourned the precious Luna." "Your mother was honored," Marcus said, his voice rough. "We held ceremonies. We remembered her." "Ceremonies." David spat the word. "While I was in a hospital bed, burned over 40% of my body, learning that my father cared more about his Alpha's grief than finding his own son." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Marcus staggered back as if struck. "David, I did not know. If I had known you were alive, I would have torn apart the world to find you. Would you? Or would you have stayed at his side, the loyal dog you have always been, choosing duty over family?" Garrett released David, stepping back. This was between father and son, a wound 10 years infected finally lancing open. He moved to check on Kate instead, kneeling beside her unconscious form. She was breathing steadily, no new injuries visible. Whatever they had used to knock her out was wearing off. Her eyelids fluttered. Marcus and David were still talking, their voices rising. "Crowe saved me," David said. "He was the one who found me in the rubble. He was the one who got me medical care. He was the one who was there when I woke up screaming from the pain." "And what did he ask in return?" Marcus demanded. "Men like Crowe do not save lives out of kindness. What did you promise him?" "Nothing. At first." David's voice wavered slightly. "He just helped me heal. Let me recover. Let me be angry. And then, when I was ready, he offered me purpose, a way to strike back at the wolves who had let us burn." "We did not let you burn," Garrett said, still focused on Kate but listening. "Crowe set that fire. He killed your mother. He killed Eleanor. He was the enemy then, and he is the enemy now. Is he? David stood, and Garrett noted Marcus did not try to stop him. Or is he just the wolf who was willing to tell the truth? That alphas like you sacrifice whoever you need to maintain your power. You wrap it in honor and duty, but in the end, you are just killers in expensive clothes. If you believe that, why are you having this conversation? Garrett finally looked at David directly. Why not just kill us and take Kate back to Crowe? David's expression flickered. Uncertainty or conflict, just for a moment. Because my father is standing here and I thought I would feel nothing. But I do not feel nothing. Then come home, Marcus said urgently. Whatever Crowe told you, whatever lies he fed you, you are my son. You will always be my son. And I am sorry, David. I am sorry I did not find you. I am sorry I failed you. I am sorry for every day of the past 10 years. But it is not too late. You can still choose differently. I have made my choice. David backed toward the tree line. Crowe is coming. He wanted me to delay you, to keep you here. And I have done that. So run, Father. Take your alpha and the woman and run, because what comes next you cannot stop. He shifted and vanished into the darkness before Marcus could respond. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of pain. Garrett gave him a moment, understanding the specific agony of having your child choose the enemy. Then he moved, lifting Kate carefully. She was stirring, her eyes opening. Garrett? Her voice was groggy, confused. What happened? You were taken. We got you back. Garrett started moving, Marcus falling into step beside him. But we need to move, now. They made it 20 yards before the forest around them exploded with wolves. Crowe had not been lying about being close. He had been closer than any of them imagined, hidden with a force of at least 30 wolves. They poured from the trees like a flood, surrounding Garrett's small team in seconds. Garrett set Kate down behind him, placing himself between her and the nearest threats. Marcus moved to guard his other side. Sarah and her wolves formed a defensive circle, bloodied but unbroken from their earlier fight. They were outnumbered 3-1, trapped in enemy territory with a pregnant woman who could barely stand. By any tactical assessment, they were dead. Then Victor Steele arrived. The Eastern Alpha came from the north with 20 of his own wolves, crashing into Crowe's flank with the force of an avalanche. The odds shifted. Not in their favor, but closer to even, close enough to fight. Victor shifted to human, standing beside Garrett. His gray beard was matted with blood, his grin feral. Heard you were having a party. Thought I would contribute. Your timing is impeccable as always, Garrett said. I am old. I have to time things right or everything falls apart. Victor's eyes scanned the enemy force. Where is Crowe? The wolves parted, and Nathaniel Crowe walked into the clearing in human form, alone but radiating confidence. He was not what Garrett expected. 10 years ago, Crowe had been in his 40s, strong but not remarkable. Now he looked 30 at most, his body lean and powerful, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. Whatever dark rituals he had been using, they had transformed him. Garrett Thornfield, Crowe said, his voice carrying across the clearing. You are harder to kill than I expected. I thought Eleanor's death would break you. Instead, you became tiresome. You killed my wife. Garrett's voice was stone. Everything that comes next you brought on yourself. Eleanor was collateral damage, Crowe said dismissively. She was investigating things that did not concern her. Asking questions about bloodlines and rituals. She was a liability. She was a person. She was my mate, and you murdered her. I executed a threat. Crowe moved closer, his wolves parting to let him through. Just as I will execute this one unless you give me what I want. Catherine Silvermane is under my protection, Garrett said. You will not touch her. Catherine Silvermane is carrying my heir, my bloodline, the future of everything I have built. Crowe's eyes fixed on Kate where she stood behind Garrett. She was always mine. You were just keeping her safe until I was ready to collect. I am not yours, Kate said, her voice stronger than Garrett expected. I will never be yours, and this child will not be raised by a monster. The child has no choice. Crowe's smile was cold. Just as you had no choice. You were born to serve a purpose, Catherine. Born to restore the Silvermane bloodline under proper control. Mine. Over my dead body, Garrett said. That can be arranged. Crowe gestured, and his wolves tensed. But it does not have to end in blood. Walk away, Garrett. Take your wolves and go. Leave the woman and the child, and I will let you live. You have already lost so much. Why lose more? Because some things are worth dying for. Garrett felt his wolf rising, his alpha presence bleeding into the clearing. Because protecting the innocent is not negotiable. Because I am done watching monsters like you destroy lives to feed your ambition. Noble words from a dying king. Crowe's expression hardened. You are 58 years old, past your prime. Your territory is unstable. Your heir wants nothing to do with you. You have nothing left but pride and regret. Why throw away your life for a woman you barely know? Because it is the right thing to do. Garrett met Crowe's eyes, alpha to alpha, and did not flinch. And because I made a promise. I keep my promises. Then you will die keeping this one. Crowe raised his hand. Kill them. All except the woman. She comes with me. The clearing erupted. Garrett shifted mid-leap, his massive wolf form crashing into the first enemy. Beside him, Marcus and Victor fought like the warriors they had always been, decades of experience making them deadly despite their age. Sarah's team held the perimeter, protecting Kate in the center. The battle was chaos. Teeth and claws and blood, wolves screaming, bodies falling. Garrett fought with the focused brutality of someone who had nothing left to lose, tearing through enemies with mechanical efficiency. He lost track of time. Every moment was survival, reaction, the constant calculation of threats and responses. A wolf lunged for Kate. Garrett intercepted, his jaws closing on the enemy's throat. Another came from his blind side. Marcus was there, taking the hit meant for him. They fought as they had always fought, together, brothers in arms, two aging wolves refusing to yield. Crowe remained at the edge of the battle, watching with clinical interest. He was waiting, Garrett realized, waiting for them to exhaust themselves, waiting for the moment when victory was assured before committing himself. Strategy, cold and effective. Garrett was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His right foreleg was injured, probably fractured. Marcus was limping badly, one eye swollen shut. Victor had taken a slash across his ribs that looked deep. They were losing, slowly but inevitably. Then Kate did something impossible. She stepped out from behind their defensive line, her hands raised, and she spoke. Not in any language Garrett recognized, something older, something that resonated in bones and blood. The Silvermane gift. She was calling on her bloodline, on abilities dormant until need awakened them. Light blazed from her hands, silver and pure. It swept across the clearing like a wave, and every wolf it touched staggered. Some collapsed, others whimpered and retreated. The dark rituals that enhanced Crowe's forces, the stolen power that made them stronger than they should be. It recoiled from Silvermane purity like oil from water. Crowe roared in fury, his composure finally breaking. No! He charged forward, shifting mid-stride, his wolf form larger than natural, twisted by the dark magic he had woven into his flesh. Garrett met him halfway. They collided with the force of mountains. Two alphas, one young and enhanced, one old and wounded. They tore into each other with primal fury, neither willing to yield. Crowe was faster, stronger, augmented by rituals that should not exist. But Garrett was fighting for something beyond himself. For Eleanor's memory, for Marcus's sacrifice, for Kate's desperate trust, for every life that had been destroyed by this monster's ambition. He felt ribs crack under Crowe's jaws, felt his own fangs find purchase in corrupted flesh. They rolled across the clearing, neither able to gain permanent advantage. Then Marcus joined the fight. Wounded and bleeding, he threw himself at Crowe's exposed flank. Victor followed seconds later, 3 aging warriors against 1 dark alpha. David appeared at the edge of the clearing, watching his father fight, watching Marcus risk everything to protect others. Garrett saw the moment the young wolf made his choice. David shifted and leaped at Crowe from behind. The betrayal caught Crowe off guard. David's jaws closed on his former master's hindquarters, dragging him off balance. It was the opening Garrett needed. He surged forward, his jaws finding Crowe's throat. But Crowe was enhanced, sustained by dark power that made him more than wolf. He twisted impossibly, throwing David into a tree hard enough to snap bones. His claws raked across Marcus's face, blinding him. His teeth found Victor's shoulder, tearing deep. Garrett held on. He felt Crowe's power burning against him, dark magic trying to corrupt his flesh, to weaken his grip. He held on anyway. He thought of Eleanor, of the child Kate carried, of every moment of the past 10 years spent in grief and guilt. He held on. Kate's voice rose again, that ancient language calling down silver light. It centered on Crowe, burning away the dark rituals, stripping away the stolen power layer by layer. Crowe screamed, a sound of rage and terror and denial, and Garrett's jaws closed. There was no dramatic final moment, no speeches or curses. Nathaniel Crowe, the wolf who had lived a century through dark means, who had killed so many in pursuit of immortality, simply died. His body collapsed, the unnatural light faded from his eyes, the enhanced strength bled away. He was mortal, and now he was dead. Garrett released his grip, staggering back. His wolf was exhausted, injured, barely able to stand. Around him, the surviving enemy wolves were surrendering or fleeing. The battle was over. They had won. The cost was written in blood across the clearing. 8 of Victor's wolves dead. 4 of Sarah's team not moving. Marcus collapsed beside his son David, both of them broken but breathing. Victor sat against a tree, pressing a hand to the wound in his shoulder. Kate knelt in the center of the devastation, her hands still glowing faintly with silver light, tears streaming down her face. Garrett shifted back to human, his body screaming protest. He limped to Kate, dropping to his knees beside her. "It is over. He is dead. You are safe now." She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw not just relief, but grief, for what she had endured, for what had been taken, for the child she carried, who would never know the innocence of a peaceful beginning. "Am I?" she whispered. "Will I ever really be safe?" Garrett pulled her against him, careful of her belly. "As safe as I can make you, I promise." They stayed like that while around them, the wounded were tended, and the dead were honored. While Marcus wept over David's broken body, father and son finally reconciled in the aftermath of violence, while Victor's wolves and Garrett's wolves worked together to secure the area and prepare for the journey home. The sun rose eventually, as it always did, painting the blood-soaked clearing in shades of amber and gold. A new day, a chance to begin again. 2 weeks later, Garrett stood in the council chamber again. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was respect in the eyes that met his, the kind of respect that came not from title, but from action. The motion to confirm Kate Winters, born Catherine Silvermane, as Luna of the Northern Territory, Thaddeus Moore read formally. All in favor? Every hand rose, even Patricia Vance, though she looked like the gesture cost her. "Motion passes unanimously," Thaddeus declared. He smiled, rare and genuine. "Welcome home, Luna Silvermane." Kate sat beside Garrett, her hand in his. She was 6 months pregnant now, her belly round and prominent. The child kicked often, strong and healthy, a new beginning growing from the ashes of trauma. Owen Thornfield stood at the back of the chamber. He had arrived 3 days ago, summoned by Marcus. The reunion with his father had been awkward, painful, full of words that needed to be said and silences that had to be endured. But Owen was here. That was enough, for now. Marcus sat to Garrett's left, his face still bandaged from the wounds Crowe had inflicted. David was recovering in the medical wing, under guard but no longer treated as prisoner. Father and son were talking, slowly, carefully, beginning to rebuild what had been shattered. Victor Steele had returned to his territory, but the alliance forged in blood remained. 2 old warriors who had saved each other's lives one more time, probably not the last. The council session ended. Garrett stood, offering his hand to Kate. She took it, rising with the careful grace of late pregnancy. "Thank you," she said quietly as they walked through the compound. "For everything, for believing me, for fighting for me, for giving me a reason to hope again." "Thank you for trusting me," Garrett replied, "for giving an old king a reason to remember why he wears the crown." They stopped at Eleanor's memorial, a quiet garden where white roses bloomed year-round. Garrett had avoided this place for weeks, unsure how to reconcile his past grief with his present hope. Kate squeezed his hand. "She would be happy for you, for us." "How can you know that?" "Because I met her, briefly when I was 14. She came to see my mother and she spent 10 minutes talking to me about books and dreams. She told me that the world was full of second chances if we were brave enough to take them." Garrett looked at the roses, at Eleanor's name carved in stone. He felt the weight of 10 years begin to lift, not erasing the grief, never that, but making room for something else, something new. "I was not looking for this," he admitted, "was not looking for you. I thought my life was over except for duty." "Mine too." Kate rested her head against his shoulder. "I thought I would spend the rest of my life running, alone, terrified. And then a grumpy alpha intervened in a diner, and everything changed. "I am not grumpy." Garrett's protest was automatic. "You are absolutely grumpy, but you are also kind and brave and exactly what I needed when I needed it most." They stood together in Eleanor's garden, two broken people learning how to heal. Around them, the compound hummed with life. Marcus training the younger wolves, David slowly learning to trust again, Owen observing, deciding if this place could be home. A family, fractured and strange and rebuilt from pieces that did not quite fit. But family nonetheless. 3 months later, Garrett stood in the delivery room, holding Kate's hand while she screamed and pushed and brought new life into the world. Sarah Chen delivered the baby with practiced efficiency, lifting the tiny, squalling infant for them to see. "A girl," Sarah announced. "Healthy. Perfect." Kate was crying, exhausted and overwhelmed. Garrett felt his own eyes burning. The baby had dark hair and green eyes and lungs that worked exceptionally well. She was beautiful. She was alive. She was theirs. "What will we name her?" Kate asked, cradling the infant against her chest. Garrett thought of Eleanor, of the white roses, of second chances and new beginnings. "Elena," he said, "if you approve. Elena Rose Silvermane." "Elena," Kate repeated, testing the name. "Yes, Elena, our little light." Marcus was the first to visit after they had moved to private rooms. He stood in the doorway, this grizzled warrior who had fought beside Garrett for 4 decades, and his expression crumbled when he saw the baby. "She is beautiful," Marcus said roughly. He had David with him, the young wolf leaning heavily on a cane but standing on his own, both of them, father and son, together. "Would you like to hold her?" Kate offered. Marcus stepped forward carefully, accepting the infant with the delicate caution of someone handling priceless treasure. "Hello, little one," Marcus whispered. "You have no idea how many people fought to make sure you could be born safely. You are already so loved." David watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Then quietly, "She looks like hope." Owen arrived that evening, still awkward around the compound but making an effort. He stood beside Garrett, looking down at the sleeping infant. "She is really yours?" Owen asked. "In every way that matters," Garrett confirmed. He glanced at his son. "I know I failed you, Owen. I know I cannot change the past, but I want to try to be better. For Elena, for Kate, for you, if you will let me." Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I am not ready to call you Dad again. Not yet. But I am here. That is something." "It is everything," Garrett said. "We start there." 6 months after Elena's birth, Garrett stood before the assembled territory, every Pack family present. It was the Autumn Festival, the first one Garrett had attended in years without feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. Kate stood beside him, Elena in her arms. The baby was fascinated by everything, her green eyes wide and curious. She had her mother's eyes and her father's determination, and she was absolutely fearless. "My family," Garrett said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We have been through darkness these past months. We have lost good wolves. We have faced enemies we thought long dead. We have been tested in ways that would have broken lesser packs." The crowd was silent, listening. Garrett saw Marcus standing with David, saw Owen talking quietly with one of the younger pack members, saw Thaddeus Moore smiling his ancient, knowing smile. But we survived. More than that, we thrived, because we chose to protect the vulnerable rather than abandon them, because we chose to fight for what was right rather than what was easy, because we remembered that a pack is not just a political structure, it is a family. He looked down at Elena, who grabbed his finger with surprising strength. "This child is the future of our territory, born from tragedy but raised in love. She represents everything we fought for, everything we will continue to fight for." Kate's hand found his free one, squeezing gently. Garrett looked out at his people, his pack, his family. "I am getting old," he said honestly. "I will not be your Alpha King forever, but while I still draw breath, I will protect this pack with everything I have. I will lead with honor. I will choose decency over convenience. And I will make sure that Elena, and every child born into this territory, inherits a world worth living in." The howls that rose in response were deafening. Approval and acceptance and unity. The Northern Territory had been tested. They had survived. They were stronger for it. That night, after the celebrations quieted, Garrett sat in the nursery watching Elena sleep. Kate appeared in the doorway, smiling softly. "You should rest," she said. "You have been standing for hours." "I am an old man. I will rest when I am dead." Garrett kept his eyes on his daughter. Right now, I want to remember this. The peace, the quiet, the knowledge that we made it through. Kate moved to stand beside him. We have an invitation from the Council of Elders. They want to acknowledge the Silvermane restoration officially. That is the letter that arrived yesterday? Garrett had seen it, sealed with ancient marks. The Council of Elders governed werewolf law across all territories. Their acknowledgement would legitimize Elena's bloodline, protect her from future challenges. It is also a test, Kate said. They will expect us to prove that the Silvermane abilities have truly returned, that Elena is who we claim she is. And if we refuse, then we remain outside official recognition. Elena grows up knowing her heritage but unable to claim it fully. We go then, Garrett decided, together, as a family. We show them that the Silvermanes are not just history, they are the future. Kate leaned against him. When did you become an optimist? When you taught me that second chances are real, that old kings can learn new tricks, that love is worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. They stood in the nursery, watching their daughter sleep, while outside the territory settled into peaceful night. Somewhere in the compound, Marcus and David were sharing a meal, slowly rebuilding their relationship. Owen was in his assigned quarters, reading reports, learning leadership. Victor was in his own territory, coordinating the alliance that would make both their packs stronger. The future was uncertain. It always was. There would be more challenges, more threats, more moments when everything seemed lost. But they would face them together. A strange, fractured, rebuilt family held together by choice rather than blood, by loyalty earned rather than demanded, by love found in the aftermath of loss. Garrett Thornfield was 58 years old, scarred and gray and past his prime, but he had never felt more alive, had never felt more certain that the crown he wore was worth the weight it carried, because he was not just a king anymore. He was a father, a husband, a leader who had learned that true strength was not about never falling. It was about standing back up, about fighting for those who could not fight for themselves, about believing in second chances, even when the world said you were too old, too broken, too far gone. Elena stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Garrett and Kate both moved instantly, protective and attentive, but the baby settled again, dreaming whatever dreams infant wolves dreamed. Dreams of running through forests, of moonlight and pack bonds, of a world where she was safe and loved and free to become whoever she chose to be. That was the legacy Garrett would leave. Not territory or wealth or political power, but this, a child sleeping peacefully, a woman standing beside him who had learned to trust again, a pack that had remembered what it meant to be family. He had been searching for redemption for 10 years, trying to atone for losses he could not prevent, and he had found it in the most unlikely place, in a diner on the neutral zone, in green eyes that held shadows, in a woman who needed saving and an old king who needed a reason to keep fighting. The last howl of kings was not a death cry. It was a declaration, a promise, a commitment that even in the twilight of power, honor still mattered, that protecting the innocent was never a weakness, that love could be found even after hope seemed lost. Garrett looked at Kate, at Elena, at the life they had built from the ashes of trauma and grief. Worth it, he thought. Every scar, every wound, every moment of doubt. All of it worth it for this. For home,